Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to talk about today's series and the LEC playoffs as a whole. We've had some interesting couple of games. I want to kind of just dig deep into it and what we should expect coming into the next weeks. Today's series, Misfits vs. Rogue, was quite uninteresting, honestly. The first game was Rogue drafting in a way that just didn't suit them. They went for that dive on level 2, and the game was kind of over after it. Misfits ended the game pretty clean. Second game, a Rogue kind of got their shit together. They drafted in a way that really suited them. They had the Azir Corki matchup in mid lane, and it seemed like Misfits hadn't prepared like the right weapons to deal with this. I think when you have time to prepare for a best of 5, I think the right way to approach it is either you try to fix your problems, which is very difficult in a short amount of time, or you try to keep working on your strengths and use your strengths to dissect the enemy team. Considering we had the Corki Azir matchup twice, just shows that, Misfits weren't really aware of what they are capable of, I think. I think if you're playing into a player that is very like to blind pick Azir, I think it's key to prepare a pick or a draft that is going to be good into Azir, especially snowballing through the early game. It is difficult to solve in such a short amount of time because Misfits' strengths were very obvious in the regular split. It was all about, mid 2v2 into top side. Whenever they were in draft scenarios where mid matchup was very stale, and this is something that Rogue always looked to force, then they were always set up for better fights into mid to late game, and this is where Rogue have shown a lot of success. That was the story of those best of 5s around Dragons, around Nashers. Rogue was just better. Rogue is going to now face Origen, and Origen, they showed a lot of promise into Fnatic. I think 2 drafts were completely lost, honestly. Fnatic were so hard out drafting OG the first 2 games. Game 3, I think, looked a lot better for Origen because they had options to play around. They could use their jungle. And on top of that, I think Game 4, they also had the potential to win. Fnatic, when they looked ahead, still look like the best team by far. And this is important to remember. When they're ahead, they still snowball crazy good. And I think Fnatic showed the highest level of class when it comes to all of the 6 teams that are in playoffs, and now 5 still in playoffs. But Origen still showed some promise, and I would still favor Origen against Rogue, because the biggest issue for Origen, I think, is that Nuktak is always left to fend for himself. They draft in a way where he's always fending for himself, and I think in moments where they have to play through mid, they just haven't grasped as to how. And that's something that's infuriating. I think in a lot of moments against Fnatic, they could have chosen to play through mid lane. They picked Rumble, did nothing with it. Rumble doesn't scale too well. Rumble needs to impact the early game, in my opinion, with the early pushing and then using the prio towards something. Nemesis could scale away for free, and those matchups where, Nuktak is drafting for the team, but he's receiving nothing in return, which I think is going to be Origen's biggest problem for the rest of this playoffs. I already talked about Fnatic a little bit. Still, I think they are looking like the best team in Europe right now, especially with the downfall of G2. Fnatic, third game, they were trolling around, obvious. Game 4, they fell behind. They lost 2v2 bottom. They died 3 times in bottom lane. Affiliates got really fed. Origen got to snowball. And then there was this one big fight where Fnatic just snapped, of course, upset in half. And then the game was just over. Fnatic is very tough to finish games against. And on top of that, they are very good when they have a lead. And I think early game looks really strong. I think Selfmade is an absolute smurf, Now we have Mad Lions and G2, 2 teams that are going to be incredibly difficult to judge for the rest of the playoffs because G2 really shit the bed. They really shit the bed. Wundo died on side a lot. Jankos went for a lot of plays that looked very impatient. I think we saw glimpses of a very strong G2, like when they had the Jarvan Rumble game where they completely dominated the game. And eventually they finished the game in a very good fashion. That was a good showcasing for Origen, how you actually use the Rumble and the 2v2 prio in order to impact the map. This was a good side of G2, but then we had all the mishaps. They got caught, they didn't prepare for Drakes properly. Mad Lions got so many Drakes when they were behind, even more so when they were ahead. Mad Lions just had better preparation around Dragon. And Mad Lions, speaking about Mad Lions, they are very well aligned with the current state of the meta. They have super good Drake control, they have good Rift-Herald swaps, and they play all the key champions. They play Set Support, they play Kalista, they play Misfortune, they play Aphelios. They play all of these key champions in the bottom side. So that's super good for Mad Lions. Everything's aligning for them. Biggest question marks coming into that series was Orome and, of course, Shadow. Orome died a lot against dives, especially in the Kalista game. He died plenty of times. And on top of that, Shadow, I think he had the performance of a lifetime. He definitely performed better than Jankos, and that's a very big and key thing to be able to say. So Mad Lions, I am excited for them. In the Fnatic matchup, I would still favor Fnatic. I think G2 really dropped the ball. They need to figure a lot of shit out because honestly, Caps was dying so many times in mid lane. Caps didn't seem to understand his role as an AD carry in a lot of these games, which was crazy to me. Wunder was dying on side. Perkz was doing his absolute best, I felt. And in some cases, he just couldn't do more than the enemy team. Mad Lions looked super comfortable individually. G2 looked super uncomfortable individually. And they have a lot of things to figure out, but I wouldn't count out G2 just yet. This could awaken something within G2. A lot of people are asking me, look, this is Caps on AD carry, Caps, Perkz on mid lane, blah, blah, blah. Will they switch back? I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what they're going to do, but this was definitely a showcasing of something that could happen, right? Perkz going bot was something that just aligned with the stars and everything went really well because Perkz is that kind of a player Perkz is the type of player that could play any role, I feel. I think his biggest strength comes from like game understanding and having good enough mechanics to play any champion at a really high level. While Caps is a very explosive player, and in the AD carry position, you don't get to be that most of the time, right? It's a very fragile role. You make one misstep and you die, and this is what you get judged for. The mentality of, for example, a Reckless is very different from the mentality of Caps, but this is a very philosophical question, so this might as well also be just bullshit, right? I think regardless of what you think about Caps, I think throughout the regular season he looked a lot better. He played the Talia, he played the Syndra as well, he played the Senna. There was a lot of champions that he had a lot of success on, and I don't think, still, if Caps goes into bottom, I don't think it's completely doomed. This is something that G2 needs to figure out and shake off, because regardless if you play mid or AD carry or support or top lane, the mistakes that Caps was doing is rarely tied to the role. It's more about, being aware of your situation and being aware of your role in the game. So I know that G2's lane phase is not the greatest on bottom because Mad Lions managed to pretty much find an all-in almost every level 2, level 3, and they got away with kills and matchups that on paper looked worse. That was pretty wild, honestly, and kudos to Mad Lions. The mistakes that cost him games are still things that I don't think is necessarily AD carry related. That's just, your mind is not just in the right place in the series. And I think even though Caps is getting a lot of flack, I think G2 as a whole definitely dropped the ball. I think Perkz played well, and then the rest really need to bounce back. And I think it's too early to count G2 out. They have a week now to reset. They'll get to watch their opponents in OG and Rogue, and then they get to prepare against that team. And then, they have a lot of time to bounce back, because I still think G2 can beat a team like Rogue and Origen because of the pace of how they play. I also want to give a lot of credit to Kazi. I think Kazi was definitely, the MVP for me when it comes to the play that we saw in the first playoffs. I think Kazi played insanely well on many different champions, and it was an absolute joy to watch. I am very happy that I got to speak to him before it, and it's fun, when you get to know him a bit on a deeper level. He is a very humble person, and he is always very critical of himself, and that seems to be the thing that pushes him forward. So I hope he latches onto that and keeps that. A big discussion has also been the discussion of online versus offline. For anyone that thinks that it doesn't make a difference, you are seriously smoking some serious kush. Because I can assure you, we are very used to, we are very privileged and used to only playing offline tournaments in League of Legends ever since season 3. I know there's been challenges series, whatever, but most of it, the key competition, the best competition has been offline. But if you look at the times before that, I remember as a player, there was a big difference between many players from their performance on LAN and online. I remember Moscow 5 as a team, they were pretty trash online. Offline, they were really, really insane. Same thing for CLG. Online, they were beatable. Offline, it was super, super difficult. There were players that played worse offline. There was online teams. The same thing can be said about a lot of CSGO teams. A lot of CSGO experts are going to tell you that there are sometimes that perform better online and way worse offline, and vice versa, and the other way around. It doesn't mean that the victory means less or the victory means more. You can view it, that question is purely subjective because both teams are in the same condition of playing online or offline, right? You experience the crowd and so forth. Of course, some organizations have better conditions for their players. This is something that is important to note. If an organization has the capability to make a room that is specifically for the LEC, and the players, when they step into this room, will have a specific feeling, right? Because no matter what people think, habits are very powerful for human beings. Certain smells activate certain thoughts, certain lights, certain environments, everything associated with things. That's why, for example, the number one recommendation for people that have sleep issues is to make sure that the only thing that they do in bed is, sleep. This is clutch, right? Sure, you can have sex in your bed as well. This is something that has been recommended. But these two things, don't go on your phone, don't watch Netflix in bed because it ruins your habits, right? Everyone has a habit of checking their phone before they go to sleep, but this is something that is not a good habit. When you see and feel certain smells, maybe you get hungry, maybe you feel a certain way. This power of association is something that really works, and I'm sure everyone experiences it during these coronavirus times. If you're working from home, getting dressed and putting on a suit, it puts me in a certain mindset. Putting on the jersey puts you in a certain mindset. Being in the van going towards the venue puts you in a certain mindset. Going to the cafeteria, getting a cup of coffee, all of these necessary steps put you in a specific mindset, put you in a place where either it affects you positively or it affects you negatively, or it doesn't affect you at all. It varies from person to person. And I mentioned, I wanted to elaborate more on the fact that some organizations have better conditions because, some coaches can also handle this better. Some coaches can handle this worse. This is something that is very new to all of us, right? And, in the video that I made about online versus offline, I recommended coaches, for example, Vitality last year, we didn't have the best scrim record, and I would be very worried about playing tournaments from the same environment where we practice, because our practice was very loose, it was very test your limits, and it was very on edge, right? And this would be very difficult to counteract. So I would just remodel the room. I would change the room in some shape or form to make sure that it awakens new senses, throw some new smells in there that they would associate with competition. Our mind is very, very powerful. For some it's better, for some it's worse. That's something that just teams have to accept. And if we look at this weekend's results, Mad Lions, we don't know what's going on within their mind. We can't psychoanalyze them or so forth. But then again, the quality of the games, they look very similar from my experience to scrim games. They just do. They look very similar to scrim games. And G2, Perks mentioned in Euphoria that Perks and G2's win ratio against Mad Lions in scrims were worse, right? So this can speak to the potential of that best of 5. Sure, when you go into the game, there is a sense of seriousness still, right? It should be different from a scrim, but all of these things matter. It is in no shape or form trying to take anything away from Mad Lions' victory or anyone's victory for that matter. But it's incredibly obtuse to say that it doesn't affect players, that it can't affect players, and that it doesn't matter. For some it's better, for some it's worse, for some it doesn't matter, right? It's just there. in the end, everyone has similar circumstances depending on their organization, and the players need to adapt to it. And those who do better are going to excel, those who do worse are going to be worse, right? Naturally. So with this in mind, that ends that discussion. I think this has been a wonderful week of games. I've been super excited. It was great for me to cast a best of five together with Trevor. It was a crazy one. G2 versus Mad Lions, to have my first best of five series go to 5 games. It's going to be an upset that is going to be remembered for a very long time. I think we're going to have a Mad Lions G2 rematch, and that one is going to be crazy, and it's going to show us, if it was a fluke or if it wasn't, because I do believe that G2 is going to beat Origen. Origen is going to beat Rogue, and then Rogue is going to, Origen is going to face against G2, and then G2 versus Mad Lions for the semifinals, and then the finals between Fnatic and whoever bounces back. Fnatic does indeed look like a favorite, but you shouldn't count out G2 just yet, Maybe bet makers are going to put very low odds on them after that loss against Mad Lions, and maybe it's time to cash in. Pay attention to social media, because G2 seem to hint very well at their current form, and I think it is important to note that G2 seemingly seem very upset over this loss, and they are not taking it lightly, And I think regardless of how you view G2 outwards, they seem very meme-y, and they like to make jokes, and they don't seem serious in certain moments in time. I think they're willing to take that exposure because it doesn't affect them, but I think losing does affect them, and I think it's going to be positive, but we will see. Anything can happen. Mad Lions showed that. Thank you so much for watching. I am excited for what's to come. We're going to release the next meditation video during the week. I prepared it. I wanted to make it proper. I hope you guys like these recaps and these little vlogs of the days. I was on Analyst Desk today. The AMA video is going to be released tomorrow. I hope you guys enjoyed. Take care of yourself. Enjoy your weekend. I can't even say words at this point. Peace.